Good evening. I'm Soraya Mia. You're watching AWANI Tonight. The government has agreed to reduce the basic average tariff for gas facility charge from January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025. Economic Minister Rafizi Ramli said the decrease in gas tariffs for the period is expected to save energy costs for the industry.
Jadi untuk menutup, saya berharap penurunan tarif kemudahan gas ini akan membantu industri berhadapan dengan kenaikan kos mendadak yang sekarang ini dihadapi oleh di mana-mana di dunia. Jadi it's incumbent upon this government to try our best within our limited resources. There are certain things we can't control, especially when it comes to pricing and supply and demand of commodities, of energy that are subject to the world supply and demand movement. But there are also some things that we can try our best to help.
Malaysia's inflation rate stood at 4% in November 2022, unchanged from the preceding month. Department of Statistics Malaysia said the Consumer Price Index for November 2022 stood at 129.0 compared with 124.0 the year before.
Chief Statistician Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin said inflation for the food group increased by 7.3% and remained the main contributor to this month's inflation. Core inflation registered an increase of 4.2% in November 2022 as compared to the same month of the previous year, with the highest increase recorded by the food and non-alcoholic beverages group with 8.2%. Muhammad Uzair also noted that 4 states recorded increases above the national inflation level of 4.0%, namely Putrajaya 7.9%, Selangor 4.8%, Sarawak 4.7%, and Johor 4.2%, while Labuan recorded the lowest increase at 2.4%.
The Statistics Department also found that Malaysia's urbanization rate tripled from 28.4% in 1970 to 75.1% in 2020. The rise was contributed by natural population increase, migration, and demarcation.
According to the Population and Housing Census of Malaysia 2020 report released today, the urban population expanded by 21.4 million from 3 million in 1970 to 24.4 million in 2020. Meanwhile, the rural population increased to 8.1 million in 2020 from 7.5 million in 1970. Selangor has the largest urban population of 6.7 million, while Sabah has the highest rural population of 1.5 million. The report also revealed that some 14.1 million, or 62.6% of urbanites are Bumiputra, followed by the ethnic Chinese at 6.4 million, or 28.6%, ethnic Indians 1.8 million, or 8.1%, and other ethnicities at 0.2 million, or 0.7%. The Bumiputra proportion has also grown compared to the last census in 2020, which was at 58.9%.
Selangor, Sarawak, and Sabah are the latest places to be hit by floods, rising the number of states affected to 8. Minister in the Prime Minister's Department for Sabah, Sarawak Affairs and Special Functions, Dato' Armizan Muhammad Ali, said 7 relief centers, or PPS, were open in these states and regions.
In Selangor, 2 PPS have been opened in Petaling and Kuala Selangor districts, housing 57 people from 18 families, while in Sarawak, 3 PPS have been opened in Bawin, Kuching districts, sheltering 104 people from 28 families. 2 PPS have also been opened in Pitas, Sabah, for 222 people from 37 families. Armizan added that the flood management in the affected districts in these 3 states was still at the first stage under the supervision of the respective district disaster management committees. However, he said the Central Disaster Operations Control Center, which operates round the clock, would always monitor the situation and be prepared to intervene if necessary. According to Met Malaysia, continuous rain is expected to occur in Sabah, Sarawak and Labuan from today.
Meanwhile, Terengganu Menteri Besar Datuk Seri Ahmad Samsuri Mokhtar has apologized for being away when severe floods displaced thousands of residents in the state earlier this week. He tendered his apology in a press conference shortly after visiting flood victims at Sekolah Kebangsaan Binjai in Kemaman earlier today. Samsuri confirmed that he was overseas from December 18th till 21st when the flood was at its peak in Terengganu. He said that while he was monitoring the floods when it first started and visited flood victims on December 9th and 10th, he decided to continue his trip overseas when he saw signs that floods were receding. The massive floods that hit the East Coast have claimed 5 lives so far, with a 3-year-old child in Terengganu being the first casualty. In other news, the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers urged the government to review the decision to split the role of foreign worker management between the Ministries of Home Affairs and Human Resources. President Tan Sri Soh Tian Lai said a single agency handling the entire foreign workers' employment process via a single online system is key to ensuring transparency and greater efficiency.
He added that the entire processing of labor demand must be handled by both ministries and should focus on security issues and issuance of the relevant visa and border control measures as done in other countries with similar dependence on foreign workers. The government recently announced that it was moving the One-Stop Center OCS for the recruitment of foreign workers back to the Ministry of Home Affairs, while the OCS to recruit domestic workers remain under the purview of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Federation said a single agency or a single online system would ensure coordinated policy implementation and also removes duplication of processes and procedures. Additionally, it removed the discretionary powers of the agencies and officers handling the applications, as well as remove rent-seeking activities. So added that by streamlining the various applications into one single system, the cost for employers will be lower as well.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Abah kamu ada je yang tak kena. Hari tu,
Wish, laju. Mari.
Sebab tu, plan dia sekarang ni paling laju. Ada macam-macam. Hebat RM10 pun dapat.
Opah tu, opah ni, awak pun nak juga kan?
Nampak gaya dua-dua ni nak Digi Fiber. Adik pun berhajat nak talent family kan?
Ceritanya semua orang nak.
Ini pelan yang terbaik untuk keluarga.
Welcome back. China has taken over medical supply production across the country as millions struggle to obtain basic drugs and test kits in the face of a surge in COVID-19 cases. Pharmacies in major cities have been stripped bare after the sudden lift of years of lockdowns, quarantines, and mass testing.
Across China, millions are struggling to get hold of basic medical supplies, such as COVID test kits and fever medication. To address nationwide shortages, more than a dozen Chinese pharmaceutical firms have been tapped by officials to help secure supplies of key drugs. According to local media reports, at least 42 COVID test kit makers whose products are licensed by China's medical regulators have had part of their production seized by the government or received orders from the state. Authorities have also urged those with mild symptoms to stay at home and take treatment into their own hands, leading to a shortage of medical supplies. As cases surge, hospital wards in major cities are filling up with elderly COVID-19 patients.
After years of enforcing harsh measures to stamp out COVID-19, China's widening outbreak has left the country scrambling to avert a collapse of its public health system. Associate Professor Alfred Wu at Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy discusses why China's excessive focus on eliminating the virus over the past 3 years had led to a poor transition out of zero COVID.
Then China resisted having mRNA, and China did not spend a lot of effort on vaccination of old people. Instead, they spent too much effort on PCR. So a lot of observers already point out the cost of PCR almost equal to the cost of vaccination. Why not vaccine old people first? But you can see that China did not do that. China's healthcare system is very unequal. If you go to Beijing, They have so many good hospitals. Then if you go to Shanghai, also not so bad. But if you go to third-tier cities or like rural areas, it's different situation. Rural areas, if you call ambulance, they will not come to you within 1 hour. Even sometimes they will come to you within 2 or 3 hours. It's impossible to handle some emergent cases.
China is expecting a peak in COVID-19 infections within a week. Authorities are predicting extra strain on the country's health system, even as they downplay the disease's severity and continue to report no new deaths.
Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha announced he has joined a newly formed political party called Luam Thai Sang Chat to run in the next year's general election, showing his determination to stay in power despite a recent ruling that limits his term to just another 2 years.
He told reporters that the newly created party, United Thai Nation Party, has offered to support him in becoming the next PM candidate in the next election. This means Prayut will not be nominated for the top job by a military-backed Palang Pracharat party, which leads the ruling coalition. In September, the Constitutional Court ruled Prayut's 8-year term limit as Prime Minister would end in 2025. The date of the election has not been decided, but if it is not dissolved early, Parliament will end its term in March, setting the stage for a vote in May. Opposition party Pheu Thai is riding high in the polls, but the current Thai constitution, drafted under military rule, stacks the system in favor of army-linked parties.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin accused Kiev and Washington of turning a deaf ear to its concerns, claiming the United States was using Ukraine as a battleground to weaken Russia. This comes as President Vladimir Putin insisted Russia was aiming for a speedy end to the fighting.
Putin said in a speech that the Kremlin's goal is to end the conflict, saying Russia is striving for this and that he will seek to make sure that it all ends, and the sooner the better. Officials in Moscow have repeatedly said in recent months that they have not ruled out talks with Ukraine. They blamed the closure of diplomatic channels on Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has said he will not negotiate while Putin is in power. The Ukrainian leader has returned from a historic trip to Washington, gaining support of nearly $1.8 billion in military supplies by the US. Meanwhile, Moscow's military chief said Russian troops are focused on completing the liberation of Donetsk. The eastern Ukrainian region is one of 4 Moscow claims to have annexed, despite never fully controlling it.
French serial killer Charles Sobraj was freed from prison in Nepal today after spending 19 years behind bars. The 78-year-old was convicted of murdering several tourists in Asia in the 1970s. He was given an early release due to his age and health conditions.
The notorious killer was released from a high-security jail in Kathmandu on Friday morning, following Nepal's Supreme Court ruling on Wednesday that ordered his release on the grounds that he had served 75% of his sentence and his health is ailing. Also known as the Serpent, his nickname for his disguise and escapade, Sobraj has served 19 years in prison out of a 20-year sentence for the murders of an American and a Canadian backpacker. Police, however, believed he was involved in the murders of more than 20 young backpackers in Asia in the 1970s and 80s. Prior to his 2 convictions in Kathmandu, Sobraj had already spent 2 decades in jail in India for poisoning a busload of French tourists. During that time, he briefly managed to escape from prison by drugging the prison guards. Sobraj will be deported to France and will be barred from returning to Nepal for the rest of his life.
How do we empower younger generations to voice out their aspirations on the global front? On tonight's episode of It's About Youth, I speak to Kira Yusri, who just returned from the EU-ASEAN Youth Summit, and Carmen Tan from the Malaysian Youth Association for Diplomacy and Policy. Tune in at 10:30 p.m. Now that ends the show tonight. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Soraya Mia, and we'll see you again next week.